So I was trying to find this before, but is there anywhere to watch Fundora and Ocampo?
Showtime. So
It's
that's a
on Showtime.
Showtime championship boxing card. And
So weird because on
I
ESPN it literally doesn't say a network.
I mean, we need. I was saying this on Twitter. We need a American fight schedule coming out soon, or else our fourth quarter is just going to be very bare bones. It's going to be very bare bones.
It's bare bones as fuck right now. We're already basically everything that's getting talked about is for the early part of next year, whether it's Charlo and um, Tim Zoo. There's all kinds of fights where, and I'm already thinking that Spence and Crawford. I'm expecting February at this point.
I mean, it's just it feels like last year had a great fourth quarter, and I'm optimistic about that. This Showtime card with Fundora, it's a pretty solid card. I really like that there's a Mike Fox versus Mean Machine Aegis Kavakalkis fight,
That's a great fight.
but I think it's on YouTube, which is also pretty good for the hardcore pugilist enthusiasts like you and me because we don't if you don't have Showtime, you can watch it on there. I believe that. Don't quote me on that. Fun card, right? We got Jerwin and Kanajas fighting. I think Fernando Martinez is the guy's name who beat him previously. That's a nice fight.
Yeah.
We got Carlos Adames versus Montiel. We got Fundora, but to me, it really looks like okay, Adames could be a guy, right? He could be a guy that contends against Charlo. Fernando Martinez, probably contractual rematch. Let's throw it, fun fight. And then after
Isn't it
that,
Montiel?
Montiel's fighting Adames. I think Fernando Martinez is fighting Jerwin and Kanajas on the opener.
I gotcha.
And then Fundora is taking on Ocampo, who's won some good regional wins on the regional circuit. But this to me kind of feels like can Fundora be an underestimated guy? Can this be a guy who we look back in 5 years and he's main eventing cards, a multi-division world champion, and this is the start of a Fundora thing? Because the thing that I think people underestimate with Fundora is not just is he talented, not just is he talented, he has something about him that not many fighters have. Joe Joyce has this, a few other guys have it. Where there's Wilder has this too. There's one selling point that'll get people interested off of the jump. Have you seen that really tall guy that fights at a lower weight class? Have you seen that 6'6" guy that's 154 pounds? That will sell to people. Just seeing that person and how skinny he is, that will sell. So I think the fact that him and his sister Gabriella are going to be fighting on this card together, this really feels like if all things work together, this is going to be a homecoming, and Sampson, as well as the other promoters, testing the waters for Fundora's star power as he ramps up to a potential Charlo fight, or what I think is coming, an Errol Spence Jr. fight in the near future. Fundora versus Errol Spence, which I think is going to be a bigger fight than people might anticipate.
I mean, I would love to see him in Spence. I ultimately see him as a guy moving up multiple weight classes. And I think that in a lot of ways, he's not really getting enough attention for what he's doing. I mean, there's a lot of guys. I'm trying to think of comparisons, but like somebody like Jaime Munguia, I don't think has a win on the level of uh Fondora's win over Erickson Lubin. So but I think it's also because he's so tall and he fights on the inside, and there's some technical deficiencies. But I feel like the way he's moving, he's moving in a different kind of way than a lot of these guys, and he's not really getting caught.
Trending to be a legend. And
Yeah,
it's kind of, he, for some reason, a lot of his cards feel like showbox fights. Like, even though the Lubin fight was a fight that you and me marked, for some reason, it didn't get that same traction that these other fights get. You get what I'm saying? It didn't get that excitement that these other Showtime championship boxing bouts get. But if he keeps being in these fights and keeps putting exciting performances together, we're going to wake up one day and go, oh, Fundora, really solid resume. One of the top three guys. When did this happen? So I think people are overlooking that he's legitimately one of the three best 154 pounders based on achievement. And we're going to see how much he can fill out an arena. And I think we're looking at a guy that's going to fight all the guys in his era. I think Fundora could fight Danny Garcia, Keith Thurman. He could fight Errol Spence. He could fight Boots. He could fight Virgil Ortiz.
Like David Benavidez.
He could fight Benavidez. He could fight. He's a guy where you could look at the end of his career and say, this guy fought a lot of really good fighters in his era.
Yeah. And I think that he's another guy that his power is going to get crazier when he moves up. I mean, him at light heavyweight, I feel like he's just sleeping guys. Like the way you see Callum Smith move out to light heavyweight and now his power has that different level. I feel like that's going to happen with Fundora being that tall.
He's a potential 6 to 7 division world champion. If he's moved in a manner that I think Samson will move him, he's a guy that could just clean up belts because he's going to just move up weights and still have such big advantages. And I think that everyone wants to be a boxing expert and say, why doesn't he fight on the outside? Look, Paul Williams and Willie Nelson hit really hard and they fought on the inside. Temperament trumps what people think are your physical advantages.
I think it's always going to be tough for people to get past that because it's so exaggerated how much bigger he is. But I think if he was at light heavyweight or cruiserweight, I think his style would be embraced a little bit more because those advantages would be less exaggerated.
And I think that that's what's exciting about him is as he moves up weight classes, I think his style is actually going to improve to a degree.
Yeah.
As long as he has durability, I think that people are going to go, oh, wow. Because I think that he's a very, very skilled boxer. But because we're not used to seeing like a shooting guard in the NBA fight on the inside with a 5'9" guy, everyone's saying, like, why aren't you Tommy Hearns? Why aren't you just turning over a jab and throwing a right hand? As you said, the exaggeration of him makes people assume that he's not a skilled fighter. And beyond that, I think that exaggeration also brings in interest because he's kind of almost like Butterbean. He's a talented Butterbean, but there's a level of, dude, I got to see the big tall guy.
Yeah. And I think like, as opposed, like you said, I think his temperament is to fight on the inside. So I think as opposed to expecting that he's just going to all of a sudden keep everything real long, I think what's more realistic is I'd like to see his inside defense improve. I'd like to see his work on the inside be a little tighter and not be getting his head swiveled every fight. That's the improvement I want to see, not necessarily that he becomes, like a Vladimir Klitschko.
Yeah, it's tough, bro. It's real tough, Look, that's another thing. Young kid developing, comes from a fighting family. I think the world of Freddie Fundora. He's got a sister who fights. There's a lot of upside. I'm curious to see how this card does. That being said, Carlos Ocampo, who's in his corner, Sean Gibbons. Sean's probably one of the best matchmakers that gets zero credit because he's not a matchmaker. He's a manager, advisor, but he picks the right fights for his fighters. So I think the other thing is, don't be shocked if Ocampo fights better than you think because Sean Gibbons just put Israel Gonzalez in with Bam Rodriguez, and that was a stylistically advantageous fight for his fighter as well.